I make photographs. I contextualize and theorize photography, but I first and foremost make pictures, and then my contextualization is through the lens, through the camera. I've been making photographs for 20 years. The main reason for making photographs is based around politics, actually, because politics is something that I enjoy. Rather than going into politics, I try to articulate how I felt and saw things through photography. 10/8 was very much part of my reading, and how people like David A. Bailey, Stuart Hall, Steve Edwards wrote about certain aspects of society, of our society. I would say it was one of the first, and I would say now still, a leading magazine that intellectually contextualized photography and the mood of England in terms of politics, race, gender, and it really conceptually theorized key leading academics' early thoughts on society, which was represented through photography. And I don't think there's anything that's replaced it since. Illustration of life, I would say, began in 1984. I ended up drawing the last 12 days of my mother's life, actually. It was not premeditated. It was just a thing, something I had to do. Maybe it was to be close with her, to be with her at a time when, again, one doesn't really understand the dying process. It was a heart condition. So for 12 days and nights, I stayed with my mother, drawing. And those drawings over the last 6-7 years have become quite significant. I remember I also interviewed in the hospital other patients, their families. This was very early forms of methodology. I was 17, 18 at the time. And this was a new area. So I was there with my notepad, interviewing these people. Many years later, while studying in university, a good friend of mine died of cancer. And watching the body deteriorate in a period of 6 months was harrowing. It was a very harrowing process. Seeing a young man, 18, 19, and deteriorate in 6 months was very, very traumatic. And with the two combined, with the death of my mother, death of a close friend, I started to make work around that. So I made work around Harvey, and these were portraits I made called The Scream, actually, and it was just a series of heads that reflected the pain that Harvey was going through. So that gave a grounding to my research in photography, using photography to explore death and dying. Illustration of life was a process of documenting the last 3 hours of my father's death. The documentary itself was not necessarily about the death of my father. It was the death of a person, someone's brother, someone's father, a friend. It's something I have never regretted doing. I think it's a poignant work in terms of engaging with the subject through a lens. In terms of death and dying, I always see, for example, my work as being a chapter to add to someone else's work. So is it a unique piece of work? No, not necessarily. It's more about adding another chapter in terms of discussing or coming to terms with death and dying. Taking boxing as a starting point, it was what surrounded boxing, the politics of boxing. That's what absolutely got me hooked into it. Without using cliches, the fascination came through Muhammad Ali. When one thinks of boxing, I think it's very difficult not to think of what Muhammad Ali did. His stance against the Vietnam War, the American, not to be enlisted, and being stripped of his world title, being put in prison and banned from boxing. I think was quite significant and poignant. That's a very defiant stance towards something that's he truly believed in. So in terms of boxing, I think for many people that's developed a legacy. And then also later on, he becoming world champion, he changed his name from his slave name, from Cassius Clay to Cassius X, and then to Muhammad Ali. And again, he made a specific point about his identity and who he is, or what he is. At home, we started to watch boxing. I used to watch. I used to enjoy watching Harold Graham, Dave Boyd Green, Duke McKenzie. There was Chris Eubanks, etc., and Prince Nazim. And I think around that, you then started to look at the fraternity of boxing and the background of these boxers and why they come to this arena to box. So everything's connected in that sort of way of their livelihood. So I was fascinated with that as a story. But the boxing itself, originally, I wanted to photograph the boxing canvas, not the boxers, just the fragments. The idea was to go up and down the country to photograph these canvases, which had imprints of the boxer's foot, and on there you would see saliva, blood, all sorts of stuff. The interest after the canvas, photographing canvas, was about repetition. I think there's a lot of repetition, ritual, and the ritual performed over and over again. It could be the massaging of the hands, it could be tying up of a shoelace, the way one of the boxers would take off their socks and massage their feet, the noises of the skipping rope and the glove on the punch bag. After you become used to it almost becomes secondary. It becomes it's a beautiful sound actually. I found it a comforting sound, even though it's a fist in a glove hitting a leather bag. So what I observed was a very silent, orchestrated movement of different bodies. But the repetition, then I started to think about my father, about his meditation, the repetition that people went through in the Gurdwara, in different temples, churches, mosques, and how, without using the boxing gloves or the bandaging, they went through their own ritual to do what they had to do in terms of being at one with the body, one with God. So when you strip away the actual conflict, and the other thing I did was not to photograph boxers in conflict or fighting. It was about the person, the identity of the person. One can discuss a subject matter without much content, but to really bring an essence to a subject, one has to really unpick the surface, really get into the fabric of something. And it's not a case of coming in and pointing the camera and making the photographs. You have to observe and absorb absolutely everything they do. Photography is about that. Photography's changed a lot in terms of how people come to a subject now. I still work in analog, I use film. Digital process has allowed photographers to do other things. And I work with the idea of I have a roll of film that I have 12 shots on there, and I don't have a digital camera where I can take 100 to 200 shots and edit as I go along. Most recently, I did the photo shoot with Carl Frotch. I used 9 rolls of film, and I know the first 7 were not very good, and the last 2, I think I got what I wanted. But Did I find that difficult? No, because that's the method I've been trained. And that's my practice. I'm not going to change my practice because of technology. Technology provides a different service now in terms of what I do. I actually was going to title it The Philosophy of Boxing. But aura is... reading about aura in Walter Benjamin's essay, Aura, in terms of how he speaks about the photograph and the reproduction, how he loses its aura. So I moved away from that deliberately and looked at aura in its widest context. What is the aura? What is my aura, your aura? Where is your space? How do you keep a balance and be at one? So you're very aware of your position, how you stand, how you move. Aura also is about the beauty, and I think everybody has an essence. When I spoke to my father many years ago, in terms of when he was meditating, he was talking about finding yourself in your body. So you have your body, you have your soul, if you believe in the soul, your heart, and the internal organs that make you function. Can you actually understand the functionality of your body to really understand your position, your movement, your balance? I've come close to it, I think, when I've started to run. I've spoken about this when I've gone for a long walk or a run, and suddenly for 30 seconds or 20 seconds, as you are running, your body feels as if it's floating, and everything feels so beautiful. You are elevated, and then it disappears. So the boxers, as a metaphor, in terms of aura, they are performing to reach a particular level of excellence in their technique to perform. And I think that's what the aura is. I think the main objective was to penetrate, if I can think about that, it was to penetrate at the sanctuary of boxing. Have I done that? I use the same ideas I did when I photographed my father. Have I penetrated death? Do I understand death? Have I captured a man actually die? I don't think I have. But you still have to believe in that in terms of what you bring to the subject. Have I penetrated boxing? I don't know, but I think I have. To photograph the boxer and the environment with a clarity I thought had already been made, exercised. We can see it on Sky, pay-per-view. And it's coming to a subject matter where you respect and appreciate what has been made. I wanted to move away from the body beautiful and a prize fighter's shot of an individual boxer. The pages are smudged, so some of the portraits are offset. There's a contact sheet, the top of a contact sheet coming on the eyebrows of Howard Clark, for example, and it's edgy. It's quite edgy, and nothing is set, nothing is clear. It's almost looking through frosted windows. But that's what I saw. So I didn't want to capture something that was quite precise. The blurring is in one way not to identify the boxer, but then also another way I wanted the place they were training in to become morphed into the fabric of the boxer. So it's almost they come hand in hand. The environment that they occupied in itself was their temple. It's a place of escapism. And maybe I didn't want to have too much detail shown because it's a private space. So there is that degree of squinting your eye, the idea of squinting your eyes and look in. And again, it's a narrative in boxing which I think had to again add another chapter to all the boxing books that have been made. I don't think the work's unique in what I'm doing, but it just gives people an opportunity to pause and have a different type of view and context to the subject matter.